Now, let me be clear, this isn't a pro-Trump video. I'm not voting for Trump, but after watching hours of footage of both Trump and Hillary, I've seen an incredible pattern that convinced me to bet $1,000 of my own money that Trump would be the next president. Even though I'm not voting for him, that's how confident I am. So let's rewind 1 year to see how Trump got to where he is and how that can show us where he's going, because as soon as Trump announced, a lot of people thought it was a joke.
Thank you, Donald. He is putting me in some kind of comedy hospice.
You see there Jon Stewart thanking Donald Trump for running. He assumed that it would give him tons of material to satirize, and he assumed that the rest of America would just laugh at Trump. Clearly, it has gone very differently. The only person I'm aware of who predicted this very early on was Scott Adams. He saw Trump's skill about 10 months ago and predicted a landslide victory in the general election. If you want to read more, check out Scott Adams' blog in the description. His analysis has really informed parts of this video. So Trump enters a field of 17 Republican candidates with huge amounts of money to spend on ads at their disposal. What does Trump do? He makes outlandish, polarizing statements.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
I will get rid of gun-free zones on schools. My first day, it gets signed, okay?
And the other thing is with the terrorists, you have to take out their families. When you get these terrorists, you have to take out their families.
I would bomb the shit out of them. And that's right. I'd blow up the pipes. I'd blow up the I'd blow up every single inch. There would be nothing left. And I'd take the oil. And I said, I'll take the oil.
Ignoring the Geneva Convention, alienating Mexicans, these are the kind of statements that make you unelectable. If he were to call Mexicans rapists the day before the election, he would lose. But Trump isn't trying to get elected, at least not at this point. He's trying to draw attention to himself in a very crowded Republican field, and the news outlets eat it up. They cover every single thing he says. All in all, he gets $2 billion worth of free media coverage, and he uses that time to reinforce the idea that he's winning, which he starts to do as soon as he insists that he is.
Every online poll said I won every one of the debates, especially the last one, by the way. Unfortunately for them, I won by many, many points.
Trump's statements earn him $2 billion worth of that message over 24-hour news networks. So the casual viewer is bombarded with messages that Trump is not only the most important candidate, but that he's winning. And all of a sudden, he doesn't seem like such a joke. At the same time, Trump starts picking apart his opponents by branding them exactly how they don't want to be seen. Scott Adams calls these brandings linguistic kill shots, and Trump goes down the line of his biggest threats, first Jeb Bush, who is the probable nominee simply because he's a Bush.
The weakest person on the stage by far is Jeb Bush.
And we don't need a weak person being president of the United States, okay? Because that's what we'd get if it were Jeb.
You're going to have to get out there yourself, Jeb. Weak. Weak, pathetic people. Low energy is a better term.
And finally, he took down Ted Cruz with one of his best brandings yet.
You know, Lion Ted Cruz came today. He couldn't draw 100 people.
Yeah, I know, but it's not what you said in the op-ed.
Breathe.
Lion Ted.
Breathe. You can do it. You can breathe.
Lion Ted. I call him Lion Ted. He holds up the Bible and then he puts it down and he lies. Okay, Lion Ted.
He repeated those phrases often on air and in the debates. Weak Jeb, Little Marco, Lion Ted. And if you're like me, this name calling initially strikes you as lowbrow and juvenile. But if you doubt how well these stick, just take a look at how much Donald's supporters adopt those names as their own. This is what happened when Ted Cruz went to speak with some of Trump's supporters who had been heckling him outside of an event.
Now, do you know on the wall that Donald told the New York Times editorial board he's not going to build a wall, and he's not going to deport anyone?
Once again, Lion Ted!
Candidate is campaigning to work for you.
Like you always do.
Okay, stop.
Cruz can't even communicate him because every single time he starts, he just shouts Lion Ted. And that is exactly what you want out of a brand. You want it to be what people associate you, or in this case, your competition with. The smartest thing is that Donald doesn't just sit alone in a room and craft these perfect zingers. He comes up with a bunch of ideas and tests their reception live. Now, this brings us to Trump as the nominee versus Hillary Clinton. Still, people are saying that it's going to be an uphill battle for Trump because he's alienated Latinos, women, minorities. But then just a few weeks ago, Trump turned on a dime and started saying things completely unlike what we'd heard from him before.
Should understand that strengthening and promoting Western civilization and its accomplishments will do more to inspire positive reforms around the world than military interventions. Too much destruction out there, too many destructive weapons. The power of weaponry is the single biggest problem that we have today in the world.
That sounds very different from the Trump who wanted to bomb them all to hell, go after the families, and allow guns into school zones. And it's by design. It's part of Trump's strategy, which can be summed up like this. First, get attention. You need to stand out when you're in a crowded field, so you have to bring attention to yourself. Second, win one audience at a time, and start with the most immediate. In Trump's case, that was Republicans who were voting in the Republican primaries. He spoke to things that were important to them. Third, remove threats one at a time, and start with the largest. So you saw how he went down the list. First Bush, then Rubio, then Cruz. Fourth, define the terms of the engagement so that you're already the winner. He successfully made this campaign about things that it really wasn't. He made it about being anti-establishment and strict on immigration. No one else had even seen those as important issues. He brought them to the forefront, and he was already the strongest on them. Fifth, be flexible based on what rallies an audience. So when you look at this strategy, it makes sense that Donald would look like a long shot to beat the Democratic candidate during the Republican primaries. He wasn't trying to appeal to the whole country, only the people who are voting. And by the way, there's not a ton of Mexicans or Muslims who are voting in the Republican primaries. And he even admits that he wasn't trying to beat Hillary and that you can expect things to change once he goes head to head with her. Check it out.
Hispanic voters have a favorable view of you, 81% unfavorable. I don't have to tell you, you cannot win in November with those numbers.
Well, I say those numbers are going way up once I start going. I have 2 more people I have to get rid of. I started off with 17, and one by one I knocked them off. And frankly, I have to, I have to do what I have to do. Now, once I start on Hillary, you'll see the numbers change.
And true to form, he's now turned his sights on Hillary. She's even got her own brand names that he's testing out, and you can expect Trump supporters to echo these for the rest of the race.
And of course, we have Crooked Hillary, folks. And that's why we're going to call her Heartless Hillary. We can do without that.
I don't know which of these Trump is going to use. Maybe he'll continue to use both Crooked and Heartless Hillary. But it is interesting to note that alliterations, where the first sound of something matches something, or rhymes, which is when the end sound matches, stick better in the mind. So we almost called our business Next Level Charisma, but chose Charisma on Command because it had that alliteration with the C sound, and it stuck better in the brain for it. By the way, if you go through and look at famous brands, you'll find that a lot of them follow this pattern, and perhaps the best ever is Coca-Cola, because it's got the rhyme and the alliteration. So we'll see if Heartless Hillary sticks. If not, count on Donald to keep coming up with new ones until he finds a brand name that does. Trump also got out in front of Hillary's favorite rallying point and made it a weakness. So watch how he mocks Hillary's reliance on what he calls the woman card and makes her stances into something that is anti-men.
Did you hear that Donald Trump raised his voice while speaking to a woman? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I mean, all of the men, we're petrified to speak to women anymore.
What's incredible about that statement is that it not only touches on Trump's common thread of political correctness, but it gives a target to those men who are scared to speak to women for their own reasons. It's Hillary Clinton's fault that you're afraid, and she's only going to make it worse. Now, I know that that sounds crazy, and that's not literally what Trump is saying, but that is absolutely how some men are going to process that remark. So, in a nutshell, that's Trump's campaign strategy, and you're already seeing it turned on Hillary. It worked incredibly well for him in the primaries, but honestly, if it were for just Trump's strategy, I wouldn't have bet $1,000 that he would win. I bet $1,000 because Hillary's campaign is shooting itself in the foot. First off, the first thing that you see on her website is a plea not to vote for Donald Trump. Nothing about why we should vote for her. Second, her website slogan has Trump's name in it, and it doesn't even make any sense. It's supposed to be some kind of double entendre, but the amount of time that you have to sit, look at it, and think about it is far too much for a slogan. And then you move on to her attacks. She attempted the same kind of branding as Donald did, but completely missed the point.
And their presumptive nominee, otherwise called their presumptuous nominee.
Don't expect this one to stick or to see Hillary supporters shouting out presumptuous Donald at rallies. It's 4 syllables long, most people don't even know what presumptuous means, and it's not really even an insult. Worse, Clinton allows her opponents to define her. Thanks to Donald, the theme of this election has been how important it is to get an outsider in the White House. Now, that is not a fact. That is a campaign strategy. You could just as easily argue that you need someone with qualifications and experience, someone who was there when Osama bin Laden was killed, who is Secretary of State and knows how to operate in the political arena. But that's not what Hillary has done. She's bought into this outsider equals good frame and is trying to defend it.
In the politics this year, it looks like everybody wants an outsider.
I cannot imagine anyone being more of an outsider than the first woman president.
Secretary Clinton does represent the establishment.
Senator Sanders is the only person who I think would characterize me, a woman running to be the first woman president, as exemplifying the establishment.
Now, is that at all believable? Hillary Clinton lived inside the White House for most of the 90s. She's been a senator and the Secretary of State. You cannot be much more of an insider than she is. So it's silly for her to deny it. What she ought to do is reframe the question like you see Obama do here. Make it about experience and know-how rather than being an outsider.
If you were listening to today's political debate, you might wonder where this strain of anti-intellectualism came from. In politics and in life, ignorance is not a virtue. It's not cool to not know what you're talking about. That's not challenging political correctness. That's just not knowing what you're talking about. It's interesting that if we get sick, we actually want to make sure the doctors, like going to medical school, they know what they're talking about. And yet in our public lives, we suddenly think, I don't want somebody who's done it before.
Hillary's insiderness could be a positive. She could point out that she was in the room when Osama bin Laden was killed. Point out that while she was helping to run the country, Donald Trump was on a reality TV show. But she doesn't. She sees that Donald Trump has crafted outsider into a good thing, and she tries to fit that mold, which she can never do better than he did given her history. Worse, she is really going heavy with the fact that she's a woman to justify that outsiderness.
I cannot imagine anyone being more of an outsider than the first woman president.
This is an extremely vulnerable position because it can easily be viewed or twisted, depending on your point of view, as anti-half the population. When Donald Trump alienates people, he purposely picks voting minorities. For instance, there are not a lot of Mexicans who are voting in Republican Party primaries. But if Hillary continues to really hype what Donald Trump is calling the woman card through the general election, you're going to see some men vote Republican for the first time in their lives. So in sum, Hillary's strategy is 1. Be clever with slogans rather than impactful. 2. Allow the press and her opponents to define the terms of engagement and then react by denying she is the things that they say she is. 3. Don't change your strategy as Donald cripples it. And 4, don't attack Donald proactively, just allow him to dismantle your weapons. And I guess that's not a strategy, that's what we have seen her do. Mostly she's been reactive. And the overarching point of this is that the election is not going to be decided on policy. I'm not sure that any American election in recent year has been, but this one particularly is going to be decided on personality and identity. Who do you like more? Who do you feel more connected to? Every year, some comedian will go and ask people who they support and then read them a list of the other candidates' policies just to prove that people do not care about policy, and this is what happens.
Are you a Hillary Clinton supporter?
I sure am.
What about Donald Trump?
Next.
No, you don't support Donald Trump at all?
I do not.
Support Hillary's plan to eliminate the estate tax?
Yes, I do support that.
So I think those are all Donald Trump's policies.
Oh, God. I hate him.
I don't mean this to pick on that woman or on Hillary supporters. The truth is you could do this just as easily with Republicans, Democrats, Hillary supporters, Trump supporters. It doesn't matter. The point is that there is a large portion of the population that is voting not at all based on policy but on image, and that portion is very easy to find for interviews. So if this election is going to come down to image, to the person who's most charismatic, who has a better understanding of how to create a brand image, there's no doubt that Donald Trump has a serious advantage in this election. That's why I bet $1,000 on him. Could Hillary do a total about-face? Absolutely. But up until now, the impression that she has made on anyone who is undecided has not been a good one. If you personally are interested in the blueprint to making an amazing first impression, we've set up another video that covers the 4 emotions that will guarantee that every single time. If you hit those 4 emotions in the right order, it doesn't matter what kind of environment you're in, from work, in the boardroom, to a bar or a party, it's all the same. So if you're curious what those emotions are, go ahead, click the box here. It's going to take you to a page where you can drop your email and get immediate access to that video so that you can begin to use those emotions today. If you've liked this video and want to be the first to know whenever we post new ones, subscribe to the channel. That way we pop up on your YouTube home screen every single week. You won't have to worry about tracking us down or missing a new video. Just click the button here and you're going to get lots more breakdowns like these. Also fictional character breakdowns. I've done a lot of Game of Thrones recently, but I'm going to break into some other things very soon. Plus the best tips that I have for being your most charismatic and confident self in the moments that count the most in your life. So if you have any video suggestions, please go ahead, write those in the comments. I'm planning 1 or 2 question and answer style talking head videos for this week, and then next week maybe another Game of Thrones breakdown, likely on the Stark's leadership qualities or lack thereof. But if you have another good idea that's really good, go ahead, write it in the comments, because those plans are all subject to change. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Donald Trump is going to beat Hillary Clinton and be the next president. Now, let me be clear. This isn't a pro-Trump video. I'm not voting for Trump. But after watching hours of footage of both Trump and Hillary, I've seen an incredible pattern that convinced me to bet $1,000 of my own money that Trump would be the next president. Even though I'm not voting for him, that's how confident I am. So let's rewind 1 year to see how Trump got to where he is and how that can show us where he's going. Because as soon as Trump announced, a lot of people thought it was a joke.
Thank you, Donald. He is putting me in some kind of comedy hospice.
You see there Jon Stewart thanking Donald Trump for running. He assumed that it would give him tons of material to satirize, and he assumed that the rest of America would just laugh at Trump. Clearly, it has gone very differently. The only person I'm aware of who predicted this very early on was Scott Adams. He saw Trump's skill about 10 months ago and predicted a landslide victory in the general election. If you want to read more, check out Scott Adams' blog in the description. His analysis has really informed parts of this video. So Trump enters a field of 17 Republican candidates with huge amounts of money to spend on ads at their disposal. What does Trump do? He makes outlandish, polarizing statements.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. I will get rid of gun-free zones on schools My first day, it gets signed, okay?
And the other thing is with the terrorists, you have to take out their families. When you get these terrorists, you have to take out their families.
I would bomb the shit out of them. And that's right. I'd blow up the pipes. I'd blow up the I'd blow up every single inch. There would be nothing left. And I'd take the oil. And I said, I'll take the oil.
Ignoring the Geneva Convention, alienating Mexicans, these are the kind of statements that make you unelectable. If he were to call Mexicans rapists the day before the election, he would lose. But Trump isn't trying to get elected, at least not at this point. He's trying to draw attention to himself in a very crowded Republican field, and the news outlets eat it up. They cover every single thing he says. All in all, he gets $2 billion worth of free media coverage, and he uses that time to reinforce the idea that he's winning, which he starts to do as soon as he insists that he is.
Every online poll